Terror Underground. 14 creepy true stories that happened down in tunnels and sewers. By Thought Catalog. There are skulls from small animals everywhere in there that shape in a big triangle that points to a very large dog-like skeleton. I do electrical work for a living, and I've been working in old Baltimore lately, and most of the buildings in Baltimore are connected by tunnels. So about a few months ago, I was working on a building on East Redwood Street, putting lights in the tunnels. Well, one day, on my lunch break, I decided to walk around them. So I'm walking for about 20 minutes when I thought in my head my foreman called me down one of the halls. I assume he went to look around as well. So I started to walk down the hall, and it started to get deeper and colder. I think about turning around because I don't want to get lost. Then I hear it again. A little deeper. Eventually, I hit a room about the size of a baseball court with probably 20-foot high ceilings. The ground is all sticky, and every step I take sounds like I'm undoing a heavy Velcro strap. There are lots of skulls from small animals everywhere in there that shape in the big triangle that points to a very large dog-like skeleton. At this point, I'm freezing and I'm really scared. I start to smell a harsh burning smell and hear what sounded like a big dog running on concrete. I can hear it getting louder and closer, louder and closer. I start running like I have never ran in my life. Finally, after what felt like an hour of running at full sprint, I run into a staircase with a big heavy metal door at the end of it. I hear the noises now, like they are right around the corner. So with all my might and adrenaline-fueled strength, I rip the door open and slam it behind me. And then I hear and feel a hard thud against the door. I turn around to see I'm standing under the docks by the Four Seasons and the Marriott Hotel. So I call my boss and tell him I got lost in the tunnels and need to get picked up. Since that day, I refuse to go in tunnels under Baltimore or go in sub-basements in Baltimore. There's an abandoned and boarded up Second World War fort in the southern part of Belgium that we often sneak into with the scouts. Getting in there requires scaling a sheer wall where we placed an anchor points for ropes and climbing gear next to a relatively busy road. So you're being super quiet, making no light and covering every time a car passes by so he doesn't spot you in his lights. The atmosphere is set. The moment you enter it, it's like driving into water. Sound stops, the entire place is at a constant 14 degrees Celsius with a slight breeze passing through. The light is barely large enough for me, slightly broader than an average person to pass within turning my body sideways. The tunnel is just high enough to work up a decent gate while hunching over. If someone ahead of you blocks the passage for a moment, the breeze stops and it feels like the entire tunnel network takes a breath. Because of the way the tunnels are constructed, they echo in such a way that your own footsteps seems to be coming from behind you. They also seem to take one more step than you do when you stop. Of course, we don't allow the guys and gals to take any source of light in there, so it's pretty scary overall. So I'm in there, posted at a side passage to ensure everyone takes the same path and doesn't get lost. I go in first before any of the climbers arrive, so they don't know there are friendly faces in there to help them. I'm in there for a while, just waiting for the first to come by, when I see a dancing little light coming down from a long hallway. I quietly settle back in my nook and wait for whoever was smart enough to hide some matches. The light quietly bobs closer when I realize there aren't any footsteps accompanying it. I poke my head around the corner just in time to see it disappear. I hear no footsteps still. I settle back and wait some more when I realize I do hear some scuffling, very faint, breathing noises, but still very faint. I became aware of a wet heat coming from right in front of me, with the faint smell of a person, sweat, dirt. Suddenly, I realize there's someone there, right in front of me, inches from my face. The breathing stops suddenly. Whatever it is, it's aware of me as well. Whatever or whoever it is, we're both holding our breath, both acutely aware of each other. It takes ages. I'm sitting there, unable to move, speak, or breathe properly. The wet heat passes, and some minutes later, I'll become aware of a very faint light coming from my right side, which soon dissipates and leaves. Sometime later still, I hear the familiar stomping of combat boots coming down the hallway from my left. I stop the person, tell them to keep following the passageway, take the first right they come to. Out of curiosity, I ask, who went in first? No one. He went in first. It was explained much later. The first guy got lost down the dead-end side passage, and the second girl passed him by. She got nervous from the footsteps and removed her shoes. She saw me poke my head out from around the corner and drop the match. She passed me very slowly. One of the later checkpoints said she was crying her eyes out. I went exploring with a bunch of friends at the trains at the lunatic asylum. While this is not underground, in its entirety the portions of it are. The buildings were left with hospital equipment, beds, books, patient files, literally everything. It's eerie, as if a zombie apocalypse occurred and everyone left. It operated from 1864 to 1994. The facility was self-sustaining, which means the patients farmed the land and had all the resources on campus. The years this was open, a lot of horror stories came out of this place. This wasn't the modern day psychiatric ward, more like a prison, where families paid a lot of money to hide their mentally ill, or the state put undesirables. There's an underground network that was heavily blocked off with chains. However, the main buildings were easily accessible, but the access ways to the underground were blocked off inside as well. Every time we got near one of the underground tunnel systems, we could hear faint music playing. It sounded like a music box playing. We found a bent, wired gate and tried to file in. The music got louder, and we were all pretty freaked out. We were all promptly arrested before attempting to go into the tunnels. There's a lot of speculation about the tunnels still to this day. The new owner said he was afraid of asbestos and was fearing for our safety. He was very grim. He agreed to drop charges if we never went back. We obliged happily. Still, I sometimes think of my interactions there. All of the remnants left behind and get severely creeped out by buzzkill. There's a sewer system under my old neighborhood, and I'll go in there and smoke weed with my buddies. We started to notice messages left on the walls in red paint, like, "We're watching you, smoke the reefer, meet the reaper." One day, while we were down there, we heard a couple of voices laughing, and they were getting closer and closer. We panicked and lifted a manhole right above that opened up to a busy road street. We never went back down there. We discovered the opening, the tunnel to the sewer system this one summer in middle school, and me and my friends started to go in there and smoke and relax away from the public. There was this one spot we liked that was dry and full of graffiti, so it was our spot, but it was pretty deep in there. One day we noticed the messages on the walls, and we knew it was fresh, since we'd never seen it before. We went back again and again without any further incident. One day, me and two others, we decided to skip school, go in there and smoke and chill. We were there for like half an hour, and we had just finished smoking a blunt when we started hearing the faint voice burst into laughter, followed by other voices bursting into laughter. We couldn't tell if it was coming from the entrance or from the deeper part of the tunnel. We stayed quiet and started hearing the laughter getting louder and more intense. One of my friends quickly went to the nearest manhole cover, started pushing up. My other friend went over to help, and we were able to open it. We crawled out of there onto a busy road and ran for our lives to the nearest apartment complex. By Smiths. I was playing in the woods and tripped over something solid. Found it was a cement circle and realized it was an underground door. The next day I came back with a crowbar to open it, and like hell, I'm going in unarmed. Pull it up, and it's a Cold War era personal bomb shelter that failed. There was a giant crack in the roof. The floor was covered with slime. But what was worse is that the walls were covered in writings. "This is the end. We must die. Everyone is gone." Till I find a black wall, and there's a giant red scroll that says, "Get the fuck out of my home." That's it. Fuck this. I'm fucking out. I sprint up the door and close it. I don't want to know what the hell that was. But I come back the next day. It's burned out. I didn't set a fire intentionally, and I didn't smell smoke leaving. By Renegade Donut. Many years ago, I worked as a technical assistant for a coal mining company. This was basically doing the grunt work for those with degrees, taking samples of things, doing data entry, driving the surveyors around, etc., etc. One of my duties was to go into the underground mines and take coal, dirt, and air samples on a regular basis. Often, this would be a little away from the other workers. One place I'd hate going because every time I'd feel and sound like there was someone standing just behind me in my left and whispering in my ear, even when the nearest person was 30 yards away or so. Probably just weird acoustics, but fuck, I hated those days. Name withheld. My buddy and me spent many years crawling through sewer pipes. One day we were out in the woods. Me, him, and another friend. We were deep in the woods. We found some pipes sticking out of a hillside and agreed to explore it. Well, we crawled down this thing a good 600 feet or so on our hands and knees. Sometimes it gets smaller and we're on our stomachs. Finally it comes to one of those big manhole rooms and we get the impression we're under a house. Of course, we also know that in some places manholes will exist in the middle of nowhere for future developments. Anyways, the room has 3 other super small pipes heading off into different directions, like slit on your stomach size. We choose one and make our friend C go first. We go down about 300 feet and he shouts back that there's something in the way. He thinks it's a dead animal. But since we're using weak headlamps, he can't tell. We coerce him to climb over it. Then come to me, he's freaking out, saying shit. It's all over his clothes, and he didn't know what it was. I climb over this dark lump of refuse. Feels like a body, but not human. Not even animal, just alien. Smells bad, smells horrible. I slide over this nasty shit, almost puking. My body behind me comes next. Same story. We keep going, asking ourselves why we even do this shit in the first place. Exploration, etc. Into the unknown, the forbidden. We crawl another few hundred feet. C starts complaining about a horrible, god-awful stench ahead. We can't for the life of him get him to continue. He ends up throwing up. We start throwing the idea around of gas of some sort. He says, with his headlamp, there's something big up ahead. Looks like an honest-to-God body, human maybe. We slide backwards quickly until we get to the manhole room. We crawl out quickly. We get into the daylight and investigate this shit stuck to our clothes from the thing we slid over. It's dark, bloody dark, refuse dark, looks like fur. We agree that it was probably a trapped animal. Never go back ever again. By Beach Noel. My grandpa got lost in the Mammoth Cave after he got back from Second World War. Apparently before he was drafted, it was not a national park, and the rules around exploring it was very loose. The property it was on was privately owned, and locals were known to trespass to explore the cave. Oh, that's what my grandpa used to tell me. He and his friends very well may have been the only people trespassing. While my grandpa was serving in the Pacific Theater, the cave became a national park. After arriving home, my grandpa and his friends that survived the war went back to explore for old time's sake. They were wandering around with flashlights when they heard a tour group. Considering they weren't in there legally and had bypassed many federal trespassing signs, they cut their lights and slowly, to be sure, tried to walk unnoticed back to the entrance. Unfortunately, they went deeper and spent 17 hours in there before getting out. He didn't have many stories because apparently you inch along in complete darkness without being able to see your hand in front of your face. But he said one of his friends kept saying, "We didn't survive that shit just to die in here." And thankfully they made it out. By Hexton Sale. Me and a few friends explored this abandoned quarry once. There was one main tunnel going back into a mountain with tons of straight offshoot tunnels and clearings intersecting it. We came to one of the cleared out areas far back in the mine. The entrance to the tunnel was out of sight with no light other than our spotlights. Laying on some rock at the bottom of the flooded, partially caved in clearing was one of those old TVs that sit like a cabinet on the floor. At first we thought it was some kind of chest or crate, but we put a spotlight on it and we realized it was an old TV. It was definitely unsettling. The whole quarry had a creepy vibe to it, but the TV was just really out of place. I guess some of the miners had it running off a generator or something back in the day. Creepy nonetheless. It was pretty far in. The main tunnel was almost a straight line. I don't know how far exactly, but we walked down the main tunnel and explored the side tunnels a bit for well over an hour. We eventually lost sight of the exit when the main tunnel dipped down slightly. At that point, it looked almost like a flashlight in the distance, so it had to be pretty far. The TV wasn't all that far from where the entrance went out of sight. A little past the TV, the main tunnel had caved in, basically creating a hill of rocks we would have to climb to progress. We figured that it was our stopping point, since the risk of rocks falling from the ceiling was pretty high. Another thing that added to the creepiness of all were these glow-in-the-dark exit signs pointing towards the main entrance. If you look closely, you could barely see them glowing off in the distance from ambient light produced by our flashlights, I assume. We were literally in the heart of the mountain, so I highly doubt TV service would have reached it. They might have used a VHS player, but it's still strange since there was nothing else around that shows signs of humans being there. You'd think they would have left something behind since the TV was abandoned, but that area was empty from what we could tell. That mine was just a strange place. By Pipewrecker. I found a gigantic cement walls under the Arlington National Cemetery. It was super spooky and not on any map. I crawled several stone pipes in Arlington National Cemetery for my job. I cannot disclose what pipe and what manhole, so I will be vague. Upon entry into the pipe, I saw an inlet at 12 o'clock, long in the distance downstream. That wasn't on any of the maps I was provided. I was lowered 25 feet deep and crawled 40 feet upstream until I found a vertical connection. It was a standard 24 service connection and terminated straight into a vault with no features, at least 8 in size on all walls. It was massive considering the native earth around it. It was a big room of nothing underneath the resting places of so many people. So far as I know, the pipe was lined and completed. That means that strange concrete box in the storm drain underneath the dead would have been sealed off for the future. Strange it would be, sealed for the future. The void beneath the death with no purpose. By Voice of Crazen. Houston is crisscrossed with bayous since it's a swamp and needs to be drained a lot. There are these gigantic tunnels that lead to the bayous and collect water from the storm drains. When we were kids, these were great to explore. We'd make maps about how to get from one area to another using these tunnels. Well, we set aside on one Saturday to try to make it all the way to the mall, a couple of miles away from the starting point. Our hand-drawn map was about halfway done. We got lost. And then, as it is wont to do in Houston in the summer, it started pouring down rain. This happened before, but we're usually close to an exit. Not this time. It kept raining. The water got high enough that the current knocked us over. Eventually, we got spit out into a bayou from a tunnel we had never ever even explored. After finally getting out of the bayou and getting back to safety, we realized that we were almost a mile away from where we started. By Broken Goose. A friend and I used to work at a university in a building that was large and located in the city. The street level floor was actually labeled as the 4th floor. The floors below that had light from interior courtyards. The elevators and stairs all stopped at 1, but there was clearly a level below that could be seen from one of the interior courtyards. One day we slipped through the window into the basement. As we suspected, none of the equipment seemed to be in use anymore, but it was cool old stuff. As we looked around, we find a stairway down. So down we go to another floor that seems to hold supports for the giant machines above, plus some large storage areas for coal. As we're looking around, we find what looks like a large tool shed standing in the middle of the floor. We don't want to damage anything, but we're intensely curious. So we managed to very carefully pry away a nailed down board to see the top of a spiral staircase going down. At this point, we're 5 stories underground, and by design nobody else knows that we're here. So we carry on. We slip through the hole in the wall and start to climb down a rickety old metal stairway. I'm in the back, but my friend in the lead immediately and calmly says, "Back up now." In the shed, he explains that the bottom of the stairs seems to be completely rusted away. There's a hallway filled with water, and it's not clear how deep the water is in the hallway. It could be a few inches or a few feet. I wanted to take a look, so I went down the stairs. Sure enough, it's as he describes, with 2 additional details. An old bell system hardhead floating upside down in the water below the staircase. After a few seconds, a wake in the water was heading towards me. At that point, it was up now. The wake could have been a wave caused by us moving around or a rat swimming in the water, but it wasn't exactly a time when we wanted to discover the local wildlife. We waited at the top of the stairs for a few minutes just to see if anything appeared, but it all went silent. We decided that the tunnel would remain unexplored. By my Georgia's Curious. This sketchy-ass tunnel I found when I was working for a fire inspection company the past few summers. We inspect all the schools in our district. I discovered doing an inspection at my old public school, one of the oldest in Canada, in the basement, a tunnel that went on for at least 100 meters. And it very well may have gone on longer, but I had this horrible vibe about being where I was. I couldn't bring myself to walk further. Finally turned back to where I came from, and it was at least 75 meters away. I immediately booked it the fuck back. By Spilota. It was quite startling to be walking through a pitch-black tunnel, come around a bend to see the light from the other side with the figure of a person walking towards you. I used to do a lot of exploring in my younger days, mainly when my friends and I would skip school and decide our time was better spent finding new places to explore than actually learning in a structured environment. I should mention I'm an Australian, just in case anyone wanted to do any type of research on any of these places. One of our favorite places to explore was a place called White Bear Power Station, which was a coal-powered station that closed its door on Christmas Day 1983. We were exploring between the years of 1997 and 2000, so the decay had well and truly set in by this time. On a side note, films such as The Matrix Reloaded and Mission Impossible had parts filmed here. Anyway, this place was absolutely huge. It has all of the usual abandoned adornments, such as graffiti and satanic signs and messages scrawled all over the walls. There was also a time we went and found a freshly dead pigeon which had a noose around its neck. It was also multi-leveled. The exact number of levels were hard to determine because it would all depend on which flight of stairs you took, which part of the power station you entered from, and which actually part of the power station you were in. On some flights of stairs, you could be 8 floors up and be able to see through the metal staircase you were standing on due to its decaying from rust. The most dangerous thing about this place was the way some levels would just drop off. There would be a big concrete platform, then nothing, no railings or anything to stop you from falling off. There was also a door which we opened that took us to the roof. The roof I nearly fell off because I got dizzy from the sheer height of the roof. Though the scariest part of the whole power plant were the big chutes where they used to store coal in. This is hard to explain, but I'll try my best. Imagine having 2 thin metal catwalks on either side of a huge metallic voids. You couldn't see more than 4 feet in front of you on the catwalks because of the sheer darkness and the inside of the voids that the coal was stored. In there, the blackest darkness you can imagine. So basically, standing on these catwalks were much like walking the plank, except you can't see anything in front of you. And if the floors below you gave away, you were done for. We also used to frequent old train tunnels in Sydney. It was quite startling to be walking through a pitch black tunnel, come around a bend to see the light from another side with a figure of a person walking towards you. This used to happen pretty often, as the homeless and the drug users would take refuge in the tunnels to either get out of the elements or to take drugs. Funnily enough, some of the best tunnels were put back in use for the 2000 Sydney Olympic train service. Now they're all cleaned up and lit up well. Another type of place we used to explore a lot were underground canals and drainage tunnels. We got a lot of good mapping them out of what we knew, which tunnels to take and take us close to possibly fast food restaurants and outlets for lunch. We found a weird tunnel one day. We were walking along and noticed an offshoot, which made us drop to our knees and crawl. At the end of this tunnel, there was what I could describe best, a small water reservoir. The water in it was only about an inch lower than the pipe we were in, and had a newish looking ladder about 5 feet away on the left side of the pipe we're currently crouched in, and a metal grate above it. We had to maneuver ourselves on an angle right on the lip of the pipe and jump and grab the ladder and climb out of the grate. We found out pretty quickly that the whole thing looked so new because we're now standing in someone's backyard.